Mahalik, he was looking to the south of him and he saw these two flying saucers approaching. He said they were reddish in color when they were in the sky, and then one of them came down and actually landed in a clearing 100 feet away from him or so. And he said as it sat on the rock, it looked like it was almost cooling, like it changed from red to like a more silver
the saucer is landing on the rocks.
Out on the rocks, yeah. And so he could see it through the trees.
Like stand here?
Yeah. So he was standing here, yeah. And the other one stayed in the air for a while and then flew off, he said.
So there are two?
There were two, yeah. And but the one left after a minute or so, it flew away, leaving just the one. And he hid behind the rock. He stayed at the rocks here looking and watching it for a long time, and nothing was really happening. He pulled out his notebook eventually and he drew a picture, drew a really detailed sketch of it, which he later gave to police when he got back to town. So he drew a flying saucer and had
so this picture get
measurements of it and everything. And
yeah,
he said he could see really bright lights coming from it and could see that this doorway had opened in the side, this small door here. And he said that bright light was coming out, and eventually after it was 30 or 40 minutes where he was watching this thing, but obviously kind of didn't want to approach it. And then he said he started hearing voices coming from it, like high pitch kind of voices. And that's when he eventually walked up to it and went right up. So we can walk right out to the site here. Follow me.
我们现在就是探索发现，还有特别，我们两个人进入了神秘的丛林中，加拿大原始丛林，要探索 UFO 的降落地点。
我只探索了文字和苍蝇。
前面的人就是用向导。
He said that it landed right
here?
Right here, yeah. So right where we're standing here.
So it's about 5 diameters?
He said it was like 35 feet in diameter, so big, like filled the whole area here.
The whole area?
Yeah, I mean 35 feet would be probably, from me all the way past you guys.
How tall?
10 feet or more, he said. So, but so quite tall. And he said that he walked right up to the door, and he had these glasses that he had for eye protection. He put them on, but it was still too bright to see anything inside, just flashing lights, bright light streaming out. And then he said the door closed. It was sort of like a metal panel, he described, like sliding across it, like a lens of a camera closing or something. And then he said the whole thing turned. Well, no, first of all, he touched it with his glove, which was a rubber glove, and it melted the fingers of his glove when he touched the side of it beside the door. And he said the whole thing turned, and he was facing like a exhaust vent on the side, and it blasted out this hot exhaust with actually enough force that it kind of knocked him back into the ground, and it started his clothes on fire and burned these circles into his stomach, and then his shirt was open a bit at the top, and he had second-degree burns on his chest. And his burned clothing and stuff was later found here, but he peeled off those layers that were kind of smoldering, and he said at that point this craft was taking off into the sky and flew away. And
how long the saucer landed here?
Well, he said he watched it for 30 or 40 minutes. Then he approached it, and this encounter happened, and it flew away right away. And he was injured, and he started feeling sick right away, he said, and he just left everything, tried to get back to safety in Falcon Lake. And so about 3 hours later, at 3 o'clock, an RCMP officer picked him up, or found him on the side of the highway, and this is the original report from the officer that found him.
Yeah, Royal Canadian Mounted Police.
Yeah, and so he was kind of staggering along the side of the highway, had these kind of looked like ashes and kind of burned marks on his clothing, and was telling this story and saying, don't come near me, I might have been exposed to radiation. That's why he thought he might be sick.
So there are radiations about the rocks, right?
So when they later came in, they found radiation here. So he went home and, well, first of all, he went to look for a doctor in Falcon Lake. There was none, so he took the bus back to Winnipeg that evening, and he went to the hospital to be treated for his burns, and then went home. They sent him home with just painkillers, and then he said that, well, apparently he got quite sick, and he was home for 2 or 3 weeks sick, and had doctors look at him, and no one could determine what was wrong other than that they eventually decided it was a mixture of hot chemicals that he'd been exposed to. And his son, who we've had out here, said while his dad was recuperating in his bedroom, his body was giving off this smell like sulfur, like burnt electrical wiring, which was really strange. And
he lives around here? He lives around this area?
Winnipeg.
When he lived in Winnipeg, he came here for the geology stuff.
Exactly, yeah.
And
then, so once he was well enough, the RCMP and the Air Force, they were investigating. They brought him back out here, and at that time, leaves had grown back up. They had quite a bit of trouble finding the site, but eventually they got back in here, and they said, yeah, his burned clothing was still here a month later, and the area was all the moss and dirt was like blasted. The rock was all clean, and it looked like compressed air had blown it all off to the sides.
So there are people came here to investigate this place, right?
Lots
of people.
Yeah.
Lots of people.
So the first visit, they took soil samples, and they turned out to be quite radioactive. So other government departments got involved investigating, and eventually they found this silver bar with uranium mixed in with it.
Uranium?
Yeah. And several other pieces of metal, and they were melted down in a crack in the rocks, like several inches down.
So
and
maybe
again,
the theory is the flying saucers is being kind of like a broke, need to be fixed here, right?
That's anybody's guess. Yeah, it's hard to say.
So is there still any trace you can tell?
I mean,
I heard there are trees here, right?
I mean, not really. Like this, I guess
back?
It just grows back over time, right? But I mean, this opening here would likely still be because of that. It would probably all be covered otherwise. But yeah, so he, he stuck to this story that this is what had happened to him. He was quite sick. They looked at him to see if it was radiation that caused his sickness, and it wasn't. He had to take lots of time off work, and RCMP had psychologists look at him, and he told his story under hypnosis, and to tons of different people over time, and all these agencies that investigated him just kind of concluded that he was a credible witness, that he wasn't likely to have made this up, and he really believed this is what had happened to him, and that he was basically telling the truth, and they couldn't disprove any part of his story, so they all just closed the file and as unexplained. It was even the American military has this listed as an unexplained encounter in their UFO files.
What's any theory like maybe it's a military aircraft?
His opinion himself was that it was a military cover-up of some kind.
Because there's no actual aliens or extraterrestrials.
He never said
right?
he saw anyone or anything. And, he heard these voices, but it was kind of distant, and he couldn't really tell.
He tried Germans, Polish.
He knew Russian. He knew Polish.
English. I know what he saw. He said, "Need help, Yankee boys."
Yankee boys, yeah.
Yankee boys, right?
That was on Unsolved Mysteries. Have you seen Unsolved Mysteries?
No.
So this was on the show Unsolved Mysteries in 1993 or something. Yeah, because his first thought was that it must be an American military craft that had broken down, and he was a mechanic, so he thought he could help them in some way.
And he looked into it, right? He looked inside.
He said he tried to, but it was so bright that he couldn't see anything in there. But he did describe how thick the walls were. He said they were like almost 2 feet thick of thick metal. Like it was really.
So it's about 10 feet tall. About this tall?
Yeah, so up to the rim, it would have been taller, but the rim of it would have been like this, and then it would have kind of sloped downwards.
And it's gonna be the whole area big.
Yeah, that's right. And when the investigators came back in, they said even like a lot of the trees and branches villages close by where it seemed to be dead. A lot of them seemed to be dead a month later.
So are those trees kind of like being there, like being those trees was there?
These are all younger than that, so it's hard to say. I mean, the big ones would have been much smaller at that time.
So this tree is a witness, hey?
Yeah, that tree would be a witness for sure.
Yeah. So 50 years ago.
52.
52.
Yeah, 52 years ago. And since then, since they removed the pieces of metal with uranium, there seemed to be no leftover radiation.
Right.
I've had people have come in here since then on these rides with a Geiger counter and looked around, but
so it's safe to pick a pick a few stones back, right?
Yeah, and yeah, they investigated any place someone could have stolen uranium to try to fake this, but you can't just get uranium. And
uranium gonna be like what? Like very dangerous nuclear weapon stuff.
Yeah, and it's highly controlled, and so it was just another part of the story that no one could explain. And the UFO experts say that if this was a hoax, if he faked the whole thing, it's the best UFO hoax ever because he fooled so many different agencies.
Yeah, and he need to hurt himself.
He hurt himself so badly. He, financially it affected him because he had to take time off work, and it was disruptive to his family. People kind of thought he was crazy from then on, and his son was bullied in school, and all these things. So yeah, why would you do that to yourself, right? Makes no sense.
So that's the story.
Yeah, that's the story.